This is a video that's meant to explain how to install a 4-inch lift kit from Currie. Disclaimer, this is my first time doing this. And I'm also following a sticky on the Wrangler forum from the dealer that talks about how to align adjustable control arms. So I thought I'd start with a video of the parts and the tools needed and give a little overview of my Jeep. So I'll start with the parts. So I'm using the Currie adjustable, they're single adjustable, and I'm just doing the front in this first video. So I've got my old lowers, my old lower control arms, new control arms, old uppers, new uppers. I've got the new Currie 4-inch springs. I'm replacing the old shocks with Rancho 9000s, and also for later video, I'm replacing my steering linkage with Currie steering, and I have a new track bar to replace my old track bar. And then tools needed for the lower control arms, you'll need a 22mm socket and a 21mm socket. For the upper control arm bolts, you'll need a 11/16 and a 16mm. For the shock bolts, you'll need a 13mm. For the drive shaft bolts, you'll need an 8mm. You'll need a tape measure to do the one of the alignments. You'll need various, I had just had these out, but wrenches. You'll definitely need a wrench to do the jam nuts on the control arms. The upper bolt on the shocks is a 14mm. You'll need a torque wrench. I have a breaker bar, a ratchet strap. You'll need a grease gun for the bolts because Currie bolts are greasable. And then I just have a bunch of other sockets. I've got an angle finder for setting the pinion and the caster. And then I do have a spring compressor because I used that the other night when I first tried to put this together. And you'll need a jack. I think that's about it. I've got safety glasses, and I also have this magnetic light which actually comes in handy when you're putting in the bolt for the lower control or upper control arms on the Jeep. So my Jeep is an 04 TJ that needs a paint job. I currently have it on blocks on the frame. I've got my brakes zip tied out of the way. I've got my sway bars disconnected. So right now the axle is completely disconnected. I have the drive shaft on a stand, and I have jacks underneath the axle and the pinion. I did replace the bushings on the axle side. This is a Dana 30. I replaced these bushings while I had everything apart and cleaned up the axle and painted it. So I went to go back and put everything back together. I also use an electrolysis machine on the brake rotors. So the intent is to show how to put it all back together. There's a breather tube on the Dana 30 that's off. And I'm going to be following the instructions by the dealer on how to align the adjustable control arms. So that'll be the next video. And this is my first time splicing everything together and putting it on the web. So I'll do the best I can shooting on an iPhone. Okay, so the first instruction on the sticky is to jack up the rig and put the jack stands under and remove the wheels and tires. So we've done that. Pull the springs, set them aside, we've done that. Now it says take your front lowers and adjust them to a starting measurement. 16 eye to eye is a good starting point. So what I'm gonna do is first measure what my old ones were, which they're right at 15 3/4, which was about what Currie also put. So I'll just follow the instructions on the web and measure my uppers to 16, so I need to extend them a little bit. That's 16. That's 16. All right. Then then you can snug the jam nuts without tightening them all the way. All right, that's done. Now it says to set the uppers to a good starting point between stock and 1/4 longer. So my stock from center to center was right at 15. Just to confirm, 15. So I'll start by setting it. I'm actually gonna go a little longer. So I'm gonna go to the 15 1/4. Because I've already done this once and I didn't think they were long enough. So it's about 15 1/4. That's about 15 1/4. So those all look right. Okay, now I have to put the control arms, so I'll do that and come back. Such is life. Ran out of daylight with the family on a Sunday, but I'm back and I'm gonna start doing the lower control arms first. So the Johnny joints, the Currie control arms have these bolts that are greasable. So I guess there's a decision on which side you put the grease and which side you put the nut to torque. So I'm gonna put, and also they've got these bigger washers to go in the housing on the axle side. So I watched their video and they had this end up, so I'm gonna do that. And again, like I said, this one is, you need 2 sockets, a 21 and a 22. So from what I understand, shouldn't be any real problems here. So I'm gonna put the torque side, actually, I don't know that it matters which side you put your grease side, but it's a little hard to get. I have an exhaust that kind of hits it, so this side's more convenient to put the grease fitting on. So I'll hand tight that. And now you want to adjust on your jack stands to get your other control, to get your lower control arm in. And on this one, I'll put the grease fitting. Yeah, I guess I'll just keep them consistent. So for now, I'll just hand tighten them. I'll go do the other side, and then I'll come back and do the uppers on this side. Okay, so I've got both the lowers in, just kind of hand tight, and now I'm gonna move to the uppers. And I did watch a Currie video because it doesn't necessarily, the instructions don't necessarily tell you if this goes up or this side goes up, but I saw him install it like this. So that's what I'm gonna do. This was the part where I said that little magnetic flashlight comes in handy, because you do have to go and get the bolt through the frame here, but it's not that big a deal. And you do have to decide again if you're going to put the nut side in, which I guess if you're going to torque it down, you don't want the nut side in the frame. So I will put the greasable joint in the frame, since you can get a grease gun in there. So, you know, you're gonna have to be taking these off and adjusting them, so I don't think there's any real reason to get very aggressive with your tightening. Now I have my axle, a jack under the pinion, which I think is gonna make it a little difficult to get this installed, so I'll have to adjust the jack, because this has to go back, and I can't do that with the jack the way it is. So I'll adjust the jack. Let's just see if I can do it. So you want to rotate it forward. You don't really want any stress, I guess, on the joint right now. But I guess it's kind of a function of the way that your jack stands are holding it. So again, you got to kind of figure out if you want your grease point to be here or there. I guess it's doesn't really matter. Should go in easy at this point, because you don't really have anything else trying to pull the axle one way or the other. So that's that one. All right, now for the driver's side, upper. See if we can get all four of them in fairly easily. Would be ideal. Now the Currie instructions said that I would have to drill out this upper frame side bracket, but I did not, and I think they were the original arms, so I don't know why the instructions said that. Well, I made that look harder than it should have been. Now this one looks like it needs to go back just a touch. Oh, let's see here. Don't really have a great way of moving the axle, rotating the axle forward, I guess. Pushing up on the sway bar link, probably the best way. Get that sucker in there. All right, that'll be as easy as it'll ever be when you don't have any stress on the system. All right, so that's step one from the Wrangler forum thread, is essentially get the control arms off, the old ones off, get the new ones on at approximate lengths. And so far this has done nothing except get them in here. And now the goal is to jack the axle up and check the bump stop alignment and adjust from there to get center. So I'll jack up the axle and come back. So I honestly don't know what the tolerance is here. I mean, it's fairly close. Looks like it could be a hair forward. I mean, sorry, the axle could be a hair back. So I don't exactly know what I'm going for here. Let's check the other side. I haven't looked at the other side, which I couldn't get the axle clearly. I'm not centered. So let me see if I can get this side up a little bit more, because I can't tell what this will be. This side is maybe worse, and it could go forward a hair. Again, I don't really know. It would hit it if it ever went up that far. And I could never find a good center for this axle, so I'm not sure if that's going to throw it off as well. And I know people say not to put it on the differential, but I had it just to the left of the differential, and that was when I got the passenger side up and the driver's side wouldn't reach the top. So I think I'm going to call that good on the bump stops, and I don't think I have the appropriate bump stops. I'm sure someone in the comments can tell me, but the guy before me had the 4-inch lift, and I think I'm supposed to have some pucks down on the axle, but I don't, and I don't do much off-roading, so I'm not sure it matters. But I'm going to move to the next step on the forum, so let's jump to that. So I've got the axle all the way down, and at this point the limiting factor on the downward travel is the lower arms, because they hit the back of your axle. So I jacked it up just a skosh, so it's not putting a lot of stress on the control arms. And now the instructions say to put the coils back in, which I don't think I'm going to be able to do with those lower control arms in, so I may have to take those out so that I can get the springs in, but we'll see. Okay, first try, get the spring in. As you can see, there's, it could be close. I mean, I could probably not get that up in there. So I'll either have to compress the spring, which I rented a spring compressor, but it's a pain in the rear, or I temporarily take the lower control arm out, which is what I'm gonna choose to do. So now with the lower control arm out, you can get the articulation that you need to get the new spring on. Feels fine. So now you can, I guess, jack it up and put the control arm back in. I don't know if it would be better to do both springs now with the control arms out, or put one control arm back in. I'll think about it. I will say in hindsight, so I took the other lower control arm off, and I guess I should have remembered this, but with only the uppers on and the spring on, and it on a jack that rolls, it tends to want to roll, the pinion wants to roll up, which the spring can look a little dangerous then. So I guess I would not recommend having a spring on and only uppers. So I should have left the other lower on the driver's side, put the passenger side back on, and now I'll just do the other side with the lower off, put the spring on, and then try to finagle the lower back in. You do have to jack the axle up to get the lower back in, because as you lowered all the way to get the spring, the reason that you took it off in the first place was because it was bound up. So whenever you jack it up, you might have to adjust the pinion angle with your foot somehow to kind of finagle the axle back in. So not necessarily super straightforward on that, but I was able to get this side in. Let's go try the other side. So this is where it gets a little dicey. I've got the passenger side control arms in and the driver's side upper control arm and both the springs. So when you go to put the lower back in, I've got I don't know, a 1/2 inch that I need to move the axle out, and I haven't found a good way to do that yet, because a ratchet strap helps if you're pulling it towards the frame. I don't really have anything on the other side that I could anchor to ratchet the axle. So I was just gonna try pushing it with my foot and see how much I can get it to go, but it doesn't look like it's gonna go as much as I need it to. So I'll have to figure out, I guess maybe I'll pull my wife's car out and ratchet to that to pull it back to get this control arm in. But that's the next step, is getting this stupid lower control arm in on the driver's side. So I did end up getting it in and straight, and the idea was not to pull the axle back, but to rotate the axle down. So I used my jack on the shock mount, which when I lifted up high enough, I guess rotated it down so that I got the control arm in. So let me go read the rest of the instructions and come back to you on what to do next. All right, so the next steps are to put the tires back on and put the Jeep under its own weight. So I'm gonna go ahead and reinstall the brakes while I'm here. I do still have a problem with my drive shaft. It won't go back in. So I'll put everything back together, and maybe somebody online can figure out what's going on with my drive shaft. So now I've got the wheels and tires back on and the weight of the vehicle back on its own. Was able to get the drive shaft back in, so that's good news. And now I'm going to check for pinion and caster, which I don't have a lot of experience with. So this is the pinion angle, and in a second I'll check the driver's side caster and passenger, because I've been doing it off camera and they're different. So here is the driver's side underneath the C, and that's what I'm getting. And let me do the passenger side. The passenger side, definitely different. I don't know what that means, but it's definitely different. Same part of the axle. So it's late, I'm probably gonna call it quits. Next step is to adjust your caster and pinion with your control arms, but until I can figure out why the caster is different on the two wheels, I'm not gonna jack with it. And then after that would be centering the axle forward and backward underneath your vehicle from, you know, your left side and your right side by doing measurements from your axle to points on the frame, and then centering it underneath it so you'll have a straight axle underneath it. And then I guess it would be centering it with the track bar. You know, of course I don't have my steering or track bar in yet, so next would be the track bar to center it horizontally under your frame. And then last, I will be reinstalling the Currie steering. And then I'll have to do the back. But I think I got a lot accomplished today, so happy with that. Till next time.